The roof was leaking, the windows were jagged holes, and the wind howled through the rooms like a ghost. But all Irina could focus on was the thin gold band on her finger. It was the last thing she had left of her husband, a 10-year promise she was about to sell to keep her 3 children from freezing to death. She squeezed her fist tight, hiding the ring behind her back as she looked at her kids huddled under a single blanket, their breath blooming in the frigid air. Before we continue this emotional journey, let me know in the comments, where are you watching from today? Irina stood in the drafty hallway of the dilapidated shack she had just bought with her last 10,000 rubles, the sound of her children's teeth chattering echoing off the damp, peeling walls. Just a week ago, her mother-in-law had thrown their suitcases into the muddy street, screaming that Irina and her leeches were the reason her son had worked himself into an early grave, and the sound of that door slamming shut still rang in Irina's ears like a gunshot. Now, standing in this ruin that barely passed for a house, she looked at 12-year-old Lena, who was trying to be brave while rubbing her brother's frozen hands, and 9-year-old Artyom, whose eyes were hollow with a hunger he was too proud to mention. Little 6-year-old Vanya just clung to Irina's leg, his small fingers digging into her coat as he asked in a tiny, trembling voice if this was where they were going to live forever. Irina didn't have the heart to tell him the truth, that they were one cold night away from disaster, so she just knelt in the dirt and pulled them all into a desperate embrace, feeling the icy moisture seeping through the floorboards. The realization hit her like a physical blow. She was a widow with no money, no friends left after years of isolation, and a home that was literally falling apart around them, yet she had to be the pillar that didn't crumble. She stayed awake that entire first night, watching the moonlight through the holes in the roof, clutching that wedding ring until the metal bit into her skin, knowing that by sunrise, she would have to choose between a memory and their survival. The next morning, the reality of their situation felt even heavier as the sun exposed every crack in the foundation and every rotten board under their feet. Irina spent the entire day walking back and forth to the village store, her stomach twisting when she saw the prices of basic bread and milk, realizing her wallet was almost completely flat. She took the only job available, scrubbing the floors of the local school for a pittance, and spent hours on her knees in cold, soapy water until her hands turned a raw, angry red from the harsh chemicals. Every time a student walked past and laughed at the pitiful new cleaning lady, Irina just lowered her head and scrubbed harder, picturing the thin soup she'd be able to buy for Vanya and Artyom. But the worst part wasn't the work or the shame. It was coming home to a house that felt like a tomb, where the dampness seemed to settle in their lungs. She started hearing a raspy, wet cough coming from the corner where the kids slept, and when she touched Lena's forehead in the middle of the night, the girl was burning up with a fever that made her skin feel like a furnace. Irina looked at the empty cupboards, then at the medicine bottles she couldn't afford, and finally at her hand, where the gold ring shimmered in the dark like a mocking reminder of a life that was gone. She knew that no amount of floor scrubbing would save them in time. The house was winning, the cold was winning, and her daughter's breath was getting shallower by the hour. The dampness in the house wasn't just a smell anymore. It had become a living, breathing enemy that crawled up the walls and settled deep inside the children's chests, turning every breath into a struggle. Irina returned from the school after a 12-hour shift, her back feeling like it was being pierced by 1,000 hot needles, only to find the house even colder than when she had left it at dawn. She didn't even take off her wet coat before she was at Lena's side, and the sound she heard shattered what little was left of her heart, a deep, rattling wheeze that signaled the fever had moved into the girl's lungs. Lena's eyes were glassy, her lips parched and cracked, and when she tried to speak, only a pained whimper escaped, a sound so fragile it felt like it would break in the stagnant air of the room. Irina checked her purse for the 100th time, but the crumpled bills only added up to enough for a loaf of bread. Not the expensive antibiotics and heavy blankets the doctor at the clinic had insisted were the only way to save a child in this condition. She looked around the room, seeing Artyom huddled in a corner trying to fix a broken chair to use for firewood, and little Vanya, who had stopped playing and was just staring at the ceiling where a new leak was rhythmically dripping, tap, 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 into a rusted bucket. The hopelessness of it all felt like a physical weight, a suffocating blanket of poverty that was slowly snuffing out the lives of the 3 people she loved most in the world. She realized then that being a mother meant making the kind of sacrifices that tore your soul into pieces, and as she looked at her reflection in a cracked mirror, she saw a woman she didn't recognize. Haggard, gray, and desperate. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the small velvet box she had been hiding under her mattress, the one thing she had vowed never to touch, no matter how hungry they got. Inside sat the ring, a beautiful heavy band of gold that represented every happy memory of her marriage, every laugh shared with Anton, and every promise of a future they were supposed to build together. She turned it over in her fingers, the engraving forever, catching the dim light of the single flickering bulb overhead, and she felt a wave of nausea at the thought of letting it go. But then Lena let out a sharp, jagged cough that ended in a gasp for air, and Irina's hand stopped trembling as a cold, hard resolve took over her entire body. She knew she couldn't wait for a miracle or a paycheck that was weeks away. She had to trade her past to buy her children a future, even if it meant erasing the last physical link she had to the man she loved. She stood up, her joints popping from the cold, and wrapped a worn scarf around her neck, not even noticing the tears that were finally starting to fall down her sunken cheeks. As she stepped out into the biting wind to head toward the city, she didn't look back at the house, because she knew that if she saw their faces, she might lose her nerve. She was going to the one place she had avoided for years, the old jeweler in the city who had sold them those rings a lifetime ago, a man who knew exactly what that gold was worth. The iron door of the jewelry shop groaned as Irina stepped inside, the chime of the bell sounding like a funeral knell in the sterile, silent room. The air inside smelled of polishing compound and old metal, a sharp contrast to the damp, earthy scent of the ruin she now called home. Behind the counter sat Vladimir, the same man who had smiled at her and Anton 14 years ago, though his hair was now a shock of white and his eyes were hidden behind thick, magnifying lenses. Irina didn't speak. She couldn't. She simply reached into her pocket with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking and placed the small velvet box on the glass display case, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Along with the ring, she laid down Anton's old silver pocket watch, the one he had inherited from his grandfather and polished every Sunday morning with a pride that seemed so distant now. Vladimir picked up the ring first, twisting it under his loop, and for a long moment, the only sound in the shop was the ticking of a dozen clocks on the wall. He sighed, a heavy, knowing sound, and whispered the word forever as he read the engraving, his eyes meeting Irina's with a look of profound, agonizing pity. He told her the gold was high quality, the watch was a rare antique, and he could offer her 200,000 rubles for everything, a sum that felt like a fortune and a betrayal all at once. It was enough to fix the roof by the windows, pay for the medicine, and stock the pantry for a year, but as the jeweler began to count out the thick stacks of bills, Irina felt like she was watching her husband's soul being traded for paper. She clutched the money to her chest, the weight of it heavy and cold, and she walked out into the grey city streets feeling like a ghost, her ring finger feeling strangely light and vulnerable. She spent the next few hours in a daze, moving through a massive construction warehouse, ordering slate, timber, and insulation, her voice sounding hollow as she negotiated delivery times. She bought the expensive antibiotics for Lena, a warm winter jacket for Artyom, and a bag of real oranges for Vanya, but the joy she should have felt was replaced by a gnawing sense of loss. By the time she returned to the village, a massive truck was already rumbling down their dirt road, filled with the materials that would transform their shack into a fortress. For 5 days, the sound of hammers and saws drowned out the silence of the forest, as a small crew of workers Irina hired with her blood money tore off the rotten shingles and replaced them with sturdy, weather-tight slate. She worked alongside them, hauling heavy boards until her muscles screamed and her palms were a map of broken blisters. But she didn't stop until the last window was sealed and the new stove was roaring with a fire that actually held the cold at bay. On the final evening, as the workers packed their tools and the house stood tall and proud under its new roof, Irina sat on the porch and looked at her bare hand, the pale strip of skin where the ring had been serving as a permanent scar of what she had given up. She had saved the house, she had saved her children's health, and she had built a wall between them and the cruel world outside. But just as she felt a moment of peace, Vanya came running out of the house, his face white as a sheet, clutching a crumpled letter he had found tucked deep inside the frame of the old fireplace, a letter addressed to Irina in her husband's handwriting that looked like it had been hidden there for years. Irina's heart stopped as her fingers brushed the yellowed, brittle paper, The ink slightly faded, but the handwriting unmistakably Anton's. Bold, slanted, and full of the life he no longer possessed. She retreated into the kitchen, the new floorboards silent beneath her feet, and sat by the flickering light of the stove, her breath hitching as she unfolded the secret he had tucked away in the bones of this old house. The letter wasn't a goodbye. It was a map, a confession written months before the accident, detailing how he had spent his final days secretly repairing this very shack, planning to surprise her with a forever home, far away from the bitterness of his mother's shadow. He wrote about a small cache of savings he had hidden beneath the floorboards of the woodshed, money he had scraped together from extra shifts and side jobs, meant for the day they would finally be free. Irina stumbled out into the night, her flashlight cutting through the dark as she tore into the dirt floor of the shed, her fingernails clogging with soil until she hit the cold, hard surface of a rusted metal box. Inside wasn't just money, it was a second chance, a life's worth of labor and love that he had meant for their children's education and their shared old age. The weight of it made her collapse onto the cold ground, a mixture of hysterical laughter and jagged sobs tearing from her throat because he was still taking care of them, even from the grave. But the relief was instantly tempered by a crushing realization. She had sold the ring to buy the very things Anton had already provided for, a sacrifice made in the dark because she hadn't known he was her silent guardian. She felt a desperate, driving need to get that gold back, to reunite the two halves of their broken promise, and she didn't wait for morning. She woke the children, their faces glowing with a health they hadn't known in weeks, and told them they were going on a trip, her voice shaking with a frantic, hopeful energy. They caught the first bus at dawn, Irina clutching the metal box to her chest, her eyes fixed on the horizon as the city skyline began to bleed through the morning mist. She ran through the streets, ignoring the burning in her lungs and the stares of the commuters, until she reached the jeweler's shop, her hand slamming against the iron door before the closed sign had even been turned. She stood there, trembling, praying to a god she hadn't spoken to in years that the ring was still sitting in that velvet tray and hadn't been melted down or sold to a stranger who wouldn't know the weight of the word, forever. The seconds felt like hours as she waited for the lock to click, her mind racing through every what if that could destroy this final piece of her soul. When Vladimir finally opened the door, rubbing sleep from his eyes, he didn't even have to ask why she was there. He saw the look in her eyes, the look of a woman who had walked through fire to reclaim her heart. He stepped aside, his silence heavy with anticipation, as he walked toward the safe in the back of the room, his hand reaching for the dial. The heavy steel door of the safe swung open with a dull metallic echo that seemed to vibrate through the very floorboards of the shop, and for a moment, Irina couldn't even breathe. Vladimir's aged hands reached into the velvet-lined darkness, pulling out a small, familiar tray that held the remnants of her past life. Her eyes locked onto the gold band immediately. It sat there, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights, its polished surface reflecting the flickering hope in her eyes. Beside it lay the silver pocket watch, its ticking heart silent, but its presence felt like a physical anchor to the man she had lost. She didn't hesitate for a second, opening the rusted metal box she had unearthed from the woodshed and piling the stacks of bills onto the counter, not even bothering to count them because she knew every single ruble was a gift from Anton himself. Vladimir watched her with a soft, watery smile, his fingers gently pushing the ring toward her, and as he did, he whispered that he had known she would come back, that a love with the word forever engraved on its heart never stays sold for long. Irina picked up the cold metal, and the moment it touched her skin, she felt a rush of warmth that flooded through her veins, a sense of completion that she hadn't felt since the day she buried her husband. She slid the ring back onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, settling into the familiar groove as if it had never been gone, a golden promise reclaimed from the brink of oblivion. She walked out of that shop not as a victim of tragedy, but as a woman who had fought through the coldest winter and emerged into a permanent spring. When she returned to the village, the house no longer looked like a burden or a ruin. It looked like a sanctuary, the white-painted walls glowing in the late afternoon sun and the smoke curling peacefully from the chimney into the clear blue sky. She found her children in the garden, their faces tanned by the sun and their laughter ringing out over the sound of the clucking hens, a melody of pure, unadulterated joy that filled the air. Lena was teaching Vanya how to plant the new seeds they had bought, while Artyom was stacking wood with a strength and a pride that made him look so much like his father it brought fresh, happy tears to Irina's eyes. She walked up the path, her hand catching the light, and when she reached out to ruffle Vanya's hair, the flash of gold caught his eye, and he let out a cheer that brought the others running. They gathered around her on the new porch, a family no longer defined by what they had lost, but by the incredible strength they had found in one another. Irina looked at the forever on her finger, then at the house Anton had begun for them, and then at the 3 beautiful lives she had saved, and she finally knew that they were going to be more than just okay. They were home, they were whole, and the legacy of the man who loved them was blooming in every flower and every brick of the life they were building together. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and tell me your thoughts in the comments. Your support helps us share more stories of hope and resilience with the world. Thanks for watching.